Step into the gentle currents of history with me as we wander through the cobblestone streets of Philadelphia. Can you feel it? The quiet hum of stories that linger in the air, carried on the breeze. It's a city that breathes history, where every brick and every shadow holds a secret from a time long past. Our journey today begins not in a grand hall or on a vast battlefield, but with a single, iconic object: the Liberty Bell. Now, I know what you might be thinking. A bell, a cracked silent relic sitting in a museum. But what if I told you this bell isn't silent at all? What if, instead of hearing its ring, we could learn to listen to its story? This isn't just a piece of metal. It's a living witness to the birth of a nation. It has seen more than any history book could ever tell us. It watched as delegates, filled with a mix of fear and fervent hope, debated the very idea of America. It felt the tension in the air, the whispered conspiracies, the impassioned speeches that would change the world forever. Forget the dusty, distant past you learned in school. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of time, not as historians with charts and dates, but as storytellers, seeking the human heart of it all. We'll imagine the sounds of horse-drawn carriages clattering over these same stones, the murmur of colonial voices discussing revolution in nearby taverns, the anxious silence before a great decision was made. The Liberty Bell was at the center of it all. It wasn't just there to ring. It was there to listen. This bell bears a famous inscription: "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." It's a powerful command, a promise etched in bronze. But liberty wasn't a given. It was a fragile, radical idea, fought for by imperfect people in an uncertain world. The story of the Liberty Bell is the story of that struggle. It's a story filled with passion, with conflict, and with a relentless dream of freedom. So, let's slow down. Let's quiet our minds and travel back together. We'll uncover the tales this bell has held onto for centuries. We'll meet the people who cast it, the ones who rang it, and the ones who were inspired by its message. We won't just look at the crack. We'll understand what it represents, the imperfections and fractures in the pursuit of a more perfect union. It's a symbol not of flawless victory, but of enduring resilience. It reminds us that even when broken, a voice for freedom can still resonate through the ages. Imagine the year 1776. Philadelphia is buzzing, the heart of a burgeoning revolution. The air is thick with humidity and anticipation. Inside Independence Hall, just a stone's throw from where the bell hung, men were signing a document that would sever ties with the most powerful empire on earth. They were pledging their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to an idea. And the bell? It waited. It waited for the moment to share this audacious news with the world. Legend tells us it rang out on July 8, 1776, to call the citizens of Philadelphia to the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence. Picture that scene. Crowds gathering, faces turned upward, listening as the words "life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness" echoed through the square for the very first time. The bell's peal wasn't just a sound. It was the birth announcement of the United States of America. It was the sound of a new chapter beginning. But the bell's story didn't end there. In the years that followed, it became a powerful symbol for abolitionists fighting to end slavery, for suffragists demanding the right to vote, and for civil rights activists marching for equality. They all saw their own struggles reflected in its promise of liberty for all inhabitants. The bell, even in its silence, spoke volumes to those who felt their own freedom was incomplete. It transformed from a simple city bell into a national conscience. Each generation has rediscovered the Liberty Bell and reinterpreted its meaning for their own time. It has traveled the country, been displayed at world fairs, and inspired countless people with its simple, profound message. Its journey mirrors America's own journey, a continuous, often difficult effort to live up to the ideals it represents. It stands as a testament to the fact that the work of liberty is never truly finished. So, as we stand before it today, let's see it not as a static monument, but as a dynamic participant in the American story. A story that is still being written. Its silence invites us to reflect. What does liberty mean to us today? How are we working to proclaim it in our own communities, in our own land? The gentle sound of history isn't just in the past. It's a conversation that continues with each of us. The Liberty Bell has passed the torch, and now it's our turn to carry it forward. Thank you for joining me on this gentle stroll through history. I hope it's given you a new perspective on this incredible piece of our collective past. If you enjoyed this journey, please please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories like this. It helps us continue to explore the quiet corners of history together. Until next time, stay curious. Welcome back to our journey through American history. In this chapter, we're stepping back in time to the 18th century, to a city buzzing with energy and ambition. A place where the very air seemed to crackle with new ideas. This is Chapter 2, the city that dreamed of freedom. Imagine yourself walking the cobblestone streets of 18th century Philadelphia. It's not just a city. It's the largest and most cosmopolitan city in British North America. Think of it as the New York or London of its time. A bustling hub where ships from across the globe line the Delaware River, their masts like a dense forest against the skyline. The docks are alive with the sounds of commerce crates being unloaded, merchants haggling over prices, and sailors from distant lands sharing stories in a dozen different languages. This isn't just a place of trade. It's a melting pot of cultures and ideas. Quakers in their simple dress walk alongside wealthy merchants in powdered wigs. German craftsmen, whose skills are renowned throughout the colonies, share the streets with Irish and Scottish immigrants seeking a new beginning. This diversity creates a unique social fabric, one woven with threads of tolerance and intellectual curiosity, largely thanks to its founder, William Penn, and his vision of a holy experiment in religious freedom. This environment made Philadelphia the perfect crucible for revolutionary thought. It became a magnet for the brightest minds of the era. Benjamin Franklin, a man who personified the spirit of the Enlightenment, called this city home. His ingenuity was everywhere from the founding of the first lending library to his groundbreaking experiments with electricity. He and his contemporaries gathered in taverns and coffee houses, places like the London Coffee House, not just for a drink, but to debate politics, philosophy, and the very nature of rights and governance. These weren't just idle chats. These conversations were laying the intellectual groundwork for a revolution. Thinkers, merchants, lawyers, and artisans all participated in this vibrant exchange of ideas. They discussed the works of John Locke and Montesquieu, debating concepts like natural rights and the separation of powers. The city's printing presses, the most active in the colonies, churned out pamphlets and newspapers that spread these radical ideas like wildfire, challenging the authority of a distant king and parliament. And at the heart of this bustling, intellectually charged city stood a modest, yet dignified brick building, the Pennsylvania State House. When it was completed in the 1750s, it was the seat of government for the colony of Pennsylvania. It was a place for local politics, for the day-to-day business of governing. But destiny had a much grander role in store for this building. As tensions with Great Britain escalated, Philadelphia's central location and its role as a major economic and intellectual center made it the logical meeting place for delegates from all 13 colonies. So the Pennsylvania State House transformed. It became the stage upon which the drama of American independence would unfold. It was within these walls that the Second Continental Congress convened, where passionate debates about liberty and tyranny echoed through the halls. Imagine the weight of the moment. Men like John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and John Hancock traveled for days, even weeks, to gather here. They were far from home, undertaking a dangerous and uncertain task. They were merchants, farmers, and lawyers, and they were risking everything: their property, their families, and their very lives for an idea. The idea that a people had the right to govern themselves. It was in the assembly room of the Pennsylvania State House that George Washington was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. It was here that Jefferson, with Franklin and Adams at his side, drafted the words that would declare to the world that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. This building wasn't just a collection of bricks and mortar anymore. It was becoming a symbol. Today, we know it by a different name, Independence Hall, but in the 18th century, it was simply the State House, a place of local government that became the birthplace of a nation. As we walk its floors in our minds, we can almost hear the echoes of those fervent discussions, feel the tension in the air, and sense the courage of those who dared to dream of freedom in this vibrant colonial capital. The story of Philadelphia is the story of how a city, built on commerce and tolerance, became the engine of a revolution. It's a testament to the power of ideas and the courage of individuals to turn those ideas into reality. The dreams nurtured in the coffee houses and debated in the State House would soon be put to the ultimate test on the battlefield, a story we will explore in our next chapter. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of 18th century Philadelphia. If you found this journey into the past as fascinating as I did, please give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss what is coming next. We'd love to have you with us as we continue to uncover the story of America. See you next time. Hello everyone and welcome back to our historical journey. Today, we're diving into Chapter 3 of a story that resonates through American history, quite literally. Let's travel back to the year 1751. Philadelphia is buzzing, a thriving center of colonial America. The Pennsylvania Assembly, the governing body of the time, has a grand idea. They decide their magnificent state house, the very building we now know as Independence Hall, needs something special for its tower. Not just any decoration, but a voice. A powerful, resonant voice that can speak to the people. They decide to order a bell. But this wasn't just about telling time or calling people to gather. This bell was intended to be a symbol, a commemoration. They were celebrating the 50th anniversary of a landmark document, William Penn's 1701 Charter of Privileges. Now, this charter might not be as famous as the Declaration of Independence, but it was incredibly important. It was a forward-thinking framework that guaranteed religious freedom and a significant degree of self-governance to the people of Pennsylvania. Think about that for a moment. In an era of kings and absolute rule, William Penn championed the idea that people should have a say in their own laws and be free to worship as they pleased. This charter was a blueprint for liberty. So the Assembly wanted this new bell to be a constant, audible reminder of these precious freedoms. It was a way of saying, 50 years ago, we were granted these rights and we will never forget them. This bell was meant to be a monument in sound, celebrating half a century of Penn's progressive vision. It was a powerful statement about the values they held dear, values that would soon ignite a revolution. The very order for the bell was an act of remembrance and a declaration of their identity as a free-thinking people. Now, where do you go in 1751 to get a top-of-the-line, massive bell? You go to the best in the business. The order was sent across the vast Atlantic Ocean all the way to London, specifically to the renowned Whitechapel Foundry. This foundry was legendary. They had been casting bells for centuries, their creations ringing out from church towers and cathedrals all across England and Europe. They were masters of their craft, known for their quality and expertise. The Pennsylvania Assembly didn't want just any bell. They wanted a masterpiece, a bell worthy of its symbolic importance. So the formal order was placed. Imagine the specifications they must have sent. They needed a bell large enough to be heard throughout Philadelphia, a city that was growing rapidly. They needed it to have a clear, commanding tone. And most importantly, they wanted an inscription that would forever link the bell to its purpose. They chose a verse from the Bible, from Leviticus, chapter 25. Verse 10, proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. These words were not chosen by accident. They'd perfectly captured the spirit of the Charter of Privileges and the very essence of what the bell was meant to represent. This inscription was a bold choice. It wasn't just a dedication, it was a mission statement cast in bronze. It was a message of universal freedom, a radical idea for its time. So the skilled craftsmen at the Whitechapel Foundry in London got to work. They created a massive mold, melted down tons of copper and tin, and poured the molten metal to forge a bell for a colony thousands of miles away. They probably had no idea of the incredible destiny that awaited their creation. For them, it was another expertly crafted bell, another order fulfilled. For the people of Pennsylvania, it was the arrival of a future icon. Months would pass as the bell was cast, cooled, and then carefully loaded onto a ship for the perilous journey across the ocean. The ship, named the Metella, set sail from London, carrying its precious cargo. The colonists in Philadelphia waited with great anticipation. This bell was more than just metal. It was their hopes and their history, forged into a single object. They envisioned it being hoisted into the State House Tower, its voice ringing out, celebrating their charter and calling their community together. They could not have known that this bell, ordered to commemorate the past, was destined to announce the future. Little did anyone know. The story of this bell was just beginning, and its first chapter in America would be a dramatic one, filled with an unexpected and resounding crack. The journey was complete, but the trials were far from over. This bell, meant to be a perfect symbol, would arrive with an imperfection that would paradoxically make it even more famous. The stage was set for a series of events that would transform this simple bell from London into a cherished American symbol, forever known as the Liberty Bell, Thank you so much for joining me on this part of the story. It's fascinating how an object can embody so much history and meaning. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. We've got a lot more to uncover. See you next time. Welcome back, history lovers. Today, we're diving deep into the heart of the Liberty Bell, exploring the powerful words etched into its bronze surface. It's a message that has echoed through centuries, a single line of scripture that would define a nation's destiny. So grab a seat, and let's uncover the story behind the inscription. Before the bell was a symbol of American independence, before it even had its famous crack, its creators had to decide what message it would carry. They turned to the Bible, specifically to the book of Leviticus, chapter 25, verse 10. The chosen words were, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." Now let's pause and think about that. This wasn't just a random pretty phrase. This verse comes from a section of the Old Testament describing the Jubilee, a special year that was to occur every 50 years. During the Jubilee, debts were to be forgiven, slaves were to be set free, and land was to be returned to its original owners. It was a divinely ordained reset button, a time of restoration, freedom, and starting anew. The man who championed this inscription was Isaac Norris, the Speaker of the Pennsylvania Assembly. He was a Quaker, and Quakers were deeply committed to principles of social justice, equality, and crucially, abolition. For Norris and his contemporaries, this verse wasn't just about ancient law. It was a living, breathing principle. They saw it as a profound statement about the kind of society they wanted to build in Pennsylvania, a place of tolerance and freedom for everyone. When the bell was first ordered in 1751, it was to commemorate the 50th anniversary of William Penn's 1701 Charter of Privileges, Pennsylvania's original constitution. This charter was groundbreaking for its time, guaranteeing religious freedom and self-governance. So, by inscribing the bell with the Jubilee verse, the Assembly was connecting their own political liberties directly to this powerful, ancient concept of divine freedom. They were saying, our freedom is not just a political idea. It is a sacred right. It's fascinating how the meaning of these words evolved. Initially, they celebrated 50 years of Pennsylvania's unique freedoms. But as tensions with Great Britain began to simmer, the inscription took on a new, more radical meaning. Colonists began to see the bell's message not just as a celebration of past liberties, but as a call to action for future independence. The phrase, "Proclaim liberty," became a rallying cry. It spoke to the desire to break free from the chains of British rule, to cast off the debts of colonial obligation, and to establish a new nation where all inhabitants, at least in theory, would be free. The verse, which once spoke of freeing slaves in ancient Israel, was now being used to inspire a revolution. It foreshadowed the Declaration of Independence and the very ideals the United States would be built upon. Of course, there is a deep and painful irony here. The words "unto all the inhabitants thereof" rang out in a land where hundreds of thousands of people were enslaved. The promise of liberty was not extended to everyone. This contradiction is a central part of the Liberty Bell story and the American story itself. Abolitionists in the 19th century would later seize upon this very inscription, pointing to the bell and demanding that the nation live up to its own proclaimed ideals. They were the ones who first called it the Liberty Bell, transforming it into a powerful symbol for the anti-slavery movement. So, when you look at that famous bell, remember the layers of meaning packed into that single sentence. It's a celebration of a colonial charter. It's a biblical command for justice and release. It's a revolutionary call to arms. And it's a constant, challenging reminder of the unfinished work of extending liberty to every single person. The men who chose that inscription in the 1750s could never have imagined how deeply their choice would resonate, turning a simple bronze bell into an enduring emblem of freedom's promise. The power of these words, chosen so long ago, is that they continue to challenge us. They ask us to consider what liberty means today and who is still waiting to hear its proclamation. It's a message that is as relevant now as it was over 250 years ago. Thank you so much for joining me on this historical journey. If you found this interesting, please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more stories behind the symbols that shape our world. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, stay curious. The year is 1752. The crisp autumn air of Philadelphia is buzzing, not with the usual clatter of horses and carts, but with a palpable, electric anticipation. After a long and perilous journey across the vast Atlantic, a special cargo has finally arrived from London. Down at the docks, a crowd gathers, their eyes fixed on a massive wooden crate being carefully hoisted from the belly of the ship, the Hibernia *. Inside this crate lies not just a ton of bronze and tin, but the very voice of Pennsylvania, a symbol of its future. This is the new State House bell. For months, the city had been waiting. The Pennsylvania Assembly, led by Speaker Isaac Norris, had commissioned this magnificent bell from the renowned Whitechapel Foundry in London. Their instructions were precise: create a bell of about 2,000 pounds, inscribed with a powerful verse from Leviticus, proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It was a bold statement, a testament to the colony's founding principles of religious freedom and civil liberty, gifted by its founder, William Penn. As the crate is carefully transported through the streets, Philadelphians line the way, pointing and whispering. Children run alongside the cart, trying to catch a glimpse of the treasure within. For most, this is the largest bell they have ever seen, or will ever see. It's more than just metal. It's a promise, a beacon that will ring out for celebrations, for warnings, and to call the citizens together. It's destined for the brand new State House, the architectural pride of the colony, a building that would one day be known as Independence Hall. Finally, the bell reaches the State House yard. Carpenters and metalworkers swarm around the crate, their tools ready. The mood is a strange mix of festive excitement and professional anxiety. Unpacking a 1-ton bell is no small feat. Ropes are slung, levers are positioned, and with a series of coordinated heaves and grunts, the crate's wooden panels are pried away. There it is. The sun glints off its bronze surface, a colossal, gleaming giant. The intricate lettering of the inscription is traced by admiring fingers. It's perfect, more magnificent than anyone had imagined. But the real test is yet to come. A bell isn't just for looking at. It's for hearing. Its true quality lies in its voice, its tone, its resonance. Will it sing with the clear, powerful voice of liberty they had all dreamed of? Or will the long sea voyage have taken an unseen toll? A temporary wooden scaffold has been erected in the yard. This isn't its final home in the steeple that's still under construction. This is just for the initial test. The honor of the first strike is given to the bell's caretaker. He approaches, mallet in hand, the crowd falling into a hushed silence. Every eye is on him, every ear is waiting. This is the moment. The culmination of years of planning, months of waiting, and a treacherous ocean crossing. Imagine the pressure. The hopes of an entire colony rest on this single swing. He takes a deep breath, steadying his nerves. He raises the mallet high, the muscles in his arm tensing. He swings. The mallet makes contact with the bronze lip, and then, a sound no one expected. Not a majestic resonant peal, but a harsh, discordant thunk, followed by the sickening, splintering sound of cracking metal. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd. Silence descends, thick and heavy with disbelief and disappointment. People stare, first at the bell, then at each other. A thin, jagged fissure now mars its once flawless surface. The great bell from London, the symbol of their pride and their principles, had cracked on its very first strike. The voice of liberty was broken before it ever had a chance to speak. The excitement of the day curdled into a profound sense of anticlimax. What did this mean? Was it a bad omen? What were they to do now? Sending it back to England would take another year, an unbearable delay. The initial shock soon gave way to a uniquely American spirit of ingenuity and determination. Instead of despairing, Philadelphia's local craftsmen saw a challenge. 2 amateur foundry workers, John Pass and John Stow, stepped forward with a bold proposition. They believed they could fix it. They weren't renowned London bell makers. They were just local tradesmen, one working with brass and the other with iron. They proposed to melt the bell down and recast it right here, in Philadelphia. It was a risky gamble. Recasting a bell of this size was a complex and delicate art. Get the alloy wrong, and the tone would be ruined forever. If the mold failed, the precious metal could be lost. But the assembly, faced with few other options, agreed. It was a decision that would transform this broken British import into something truly American. Pass and Stow got to work. They shattered the great bell into smaller pieces, a heart-wrenching task that symbolized the deconstruction of the old to make way for the new. They built a furnace, and to make the metal less brittle, they added about 100 pounds of local copper to the mix. The molten bronze glowed in the Philadelphia workshop, a fiery crucible from which a new voice would be born. The first recasting wasn't a complete success. The tone was apparently unsatisfactory, so they melted it down and tried again. This relentless pursuit of perfection, this refusal to accept failure, is a story in itself. Finally, in June of 1753, nearly a year after the original bell's ill-fated arrival, the new American-made bell was ready. It was hoisted into the State House steeple, this time for good. When it was rung, its tone was different from what the London original would have sounded like. It was unique, shaped by local hands and local metal. This was no longer just a bell from London, it was Philadelphia's bell. It had been broken and remade, stronger and with a new character. Little did anyone know that this twice-cast bell, born from an initial spectacular failure, would go on to have a destiny far greater than anyone could have imagined. Its famous crack, which would reappear later in its life, would become its most defining feature, a symbol of imperfection, resilience, and the enduring, if sometimes fragile, nature of liberty itself. The silent crack of 1752 was not an end, but the true beginning of the Liberty Bell's story. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes our greatest successes are born from our most unexpected setbacks. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the fascinating corners of history. We'll see you in the next chapter. Have you ever poured your heart and soul into something, only to see it shatter at the very first test? Imagine the scene. A massive bell, a symbol of hope and a new era, is finally complete. The air is thick with anticipation. The moment of truth arrives. A mallet is raised, swings through the air, and strikes. But instead of a triumphant, clear peal that was meant to echo for miles, there's a sickening, jarring sound. A crack. Silence falls, thick and heavy with shock and disbelief. The bell, this magnificent creation, is broken. This isn't just a story. It's a moment frozen in time, a lesson in unexpected failure. This was meant to be the first ring, the one that would announce its readiness to the world. Instead, it was its last. The sound that was supposed to ring out with freedom was choked into a dissonant fracture. The dream, for a moment, seemed to die with that sound. What happened? How could it all go so wrong? The questions began to swirl immediately, a storm of doubt and investigation. The craftsmen, the financiers, the entire community that had watched this project with bated breath, they were all stunned. This wasn't a minor flaw. This was a catastrophic failure. The immediate suspicion fell on the materials. Was the metal itself the culprit? Metallurgy in those days was as much an art as it was a science. Perhaps the alloy was wrong. Was there too much tin, making the bronze too brittle, or not enough, making it too soft? A slight miscalculation, a single degree of temperature off in the furnace, could spell disaster. The very foundation of the bell, its metallic DNA, was now under intense scrutiny. Then there was the casting process itself. Casting a bell of this size is a monumental undertaking. It requires a perfectly constructed mold, a precisely controlled pour of molten metal, and a painstakingly slow cooling process. Any mistake along the way could introduce a fatal weakness. Was there an air bubble trapped within the metal, an invisible pocket of nothingness that became the starting point for the crack? Did the mold shift even a millimeter during the pour? Or perhaps it cooled too quickly. Imagine the massive bell, glowing red-hot, being exposed to a sudden draft of cold air. The thermal shock could have created internal stresses, a ticking time bomb waiting for the first impact to detonate. The disappointment was palpable. It was more than just a broken piece of metal. It was a fractured promise. All the effort, the resources, the collective hope poured into its creation had seemingly turned to dust. The sound of failure is often much louder than the sound of success, and on that day, the silence that followed the crack was deafening. It was a silence filled with the ghosts of what could have been the perfect resonant tone that now would never be heard. But this moment of failure is also where a fascinating detective story begins. The investigation into the why would push the boundaries of their understanding. They had to become metallurgists, engineers, and forensics experts all at once. They would have to examine the crack itself, studying its path. Did it follow a specific line? Was it jagged or smooth? Every detail of the fracture held a clue to its origin story. This wasn't just about figuring out what went wrong. It was about ensuring it would never happen again. Think about the pressure on the bell founders. Their reputation was on the line. They were the masters of their craft, and their masterpiece had failed spectacularly. They had to face their patrons and explain the unexplainable. This single event could ruin their business, tarnish their name for generations. The weight of this cracked bell was far heavier than its physical tonnage. It was the weight of public trust and professional pride. This story of the first ring and the first crack serves as a powerful metaphor. How often in our own lives do our greatest plans and most heartfelt efforts result in an unexpected fracture? We prepare, we build, we invest everything we have, and at the first real test, something gives way. It's in these moments of breaking that we are truly tested. Do we give up? Do we walk away from the shattered pieces? Or do we, like the bell makers, begin the painstaking process of figuring out why, learning from the break, and resolving to cast a new, stronger bell? The journey from that jarring crack to a future success is the real story. The failure wasn't the end. It was a brutal, but necessary, beginning. It forced innovation. It demanded greater precision, better science, and a deeper respect for the volatile nature of creation. The broken bell became an unwilling teacher, its silence a lecture on humility and resilience. And so, from the ashes of this disappointment, a new determination was forged. The goal was no longer just to create a bell, but to create a perfect bell, one whose ring would eventually overcome the memory of that first, heartbreaking crack. What do you think was the most likely cause of the crack? The metal mix or the casting process? Let me know your theories in the comments below. It's a fascinating piece of history to unravel. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this deep dive, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories from the past. See you next time. Hello and welcome back to our journey through history. In our last chapter, we left off with a brand new bell, a symbol of pride for the Pennsylvania Assembly, arriving from London only to crack on its very first test ring. A disastrous start, wouldn't you say? But as is often the case in great stories, this moment of failure wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a truly American chapter. This is Chapter 7, The Recasting, A Second Chance. Imagine the scene in Philadelphia in 1752. The Assembly is in a bind. Sending the massive bell back to Whitechapel Foundry in London would take months, maybe even a year. It was costly, time-consuming, and honestly, a bit embarrassing. Speaker Isaac Norris and the committee were under pressure. They needed a solution, and they needed it fast. So they decided to look closer to home, placing their faith in local talent. This is where our two unlikely heroes enter the story, John Pass and John Stow. Now, these weren't master bell founders with generations of experience. Far from it. John Stow was a brass founder by trade, skilled with metal, but with no experience in casting something of this size and complexity. John Pass's background is even more obscure. Some historical accounts refer to him as a founder, but his primary connection to this project seems to have been his ingenuity and willingness to take on a monumental challenge. They were, in essence, two local artisans, two Yankee tinkerers who looked at this giant, cracked bell and said, "We can fix that." This decision was a huge gamble. The science of bell founding, or campanology, is incredibly precise. The specific alloy of metals, the shape of the mold, the temperature of the molten bronze, the cooling process, every single step affects the final tone. A slight miscalculation could result in another crack, or worse, a bell that sounded dull and lifeless, a kettle, as founders would call it. The London bell was made primarily of bronze, which is about 80% copper and 20% tin. The crack suggested the metal was too brittle, so Pass and Stow got to work. Their first task was to break the original bell into smaller pieces. They built a massive furnace in the yard of the State House, right where Independence Hall stands today. They melted down the fragments of the English bell, a fiery, dramatic process that must have been quite a spectacle for the citizens of Philadelphia. To counteract the brittleness they believed caused the first crack, they made a crucial decision. They added more copper to the mix. Specifically, they added about 1.5 ounces of American copper for every pound of the old bell. Their theory was that a softer, less tin-heavy alloy would produce a stronger, more resilient bell. It was a bold move, driven by practical thinking rather than ancient tradition. After weeks of painstaking work, melting, mixing, and preparing the massive mold, the moment of truth arrived. They poured the molten metal, a glowing river of bronze, into the new cast. Then came the agonizing wait as the bell slowly cooled. When it was finally time to test their creation, the entire city held its breath. The bell was hoisted, and the clapper struck. And the sound? Well, it wasn't what anyone expected. The tone was, by all accounts, terrible. The extra copper had made the bell sound dull and harsh. Speaker Isaac Norris was deeply disappointed, writing that he couldn't judge the sound and that most others disliked it. It seemed the local experiment was a failure. The gamble hadn't paid off. The Philadelphians, known for their sharp wit, were quick to mock the two founders. Pass and Stow were subjected to public ridicule for their attempt. But here's where the story gets really inspiring. Did Pass and Stow give up? Did they pack up their tools and shrink away from the criticism? Absolutely not. Their pride was on the line. They offered to melt the bell down again and try a second time at their own expense. This is the kind of resilience and determination that defines the American spirit. They had failed, learned a valuable lesson about metallurgy, and were determined to get it right. So, for the second time, the bell was shattered. Back into the furnace it went. This time, they adjusted the formula. Knowing that too much copper deadened the sound, they added more tin back into the alloy, trying to get closer to the classic bell-metal ratio. They were learning on the job, refining their process through trial and error. They were no longer just imitating. They were innovating. Finally, in June of 1753, their second attempt, the third version of the bell, was complete. And this time when it was struck, the sound was right. It wasn't perfect, perhaps not as melodious as the finest European bells, but it was strong, clear, and resonant. It was acceptable. The assembly approved, and the bell was finally hung in the State House steeple. And as a mark of their hard-won success, Pass and Stow cast their own names directly onto the bell, right below the original inscription from Leviticus. If you look at the Liberty Bell today, you will see it clearly, Pass and Stow /Philada, MDCCL, their names etched into metal and into history. A permanent testament to two local craftsmen who dared to take on an impossible task, failed, faced ridicule, and tried again until they succeeded. This recasting is a pivotal moment. The bell was no longer just an English import. It had been broken, melted down in American soil, and reforged by American hands. Its very composition was now a mix of English bronze and American copper. It had become something new, something uniquely its own. It was a symbol not of a distant king, but of local ingenuity, persistence, and the courage to try again after failure. This wasn't just a repair job. It was the true birth of the American Liberty Bell. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. The story of this bell is a story of second chances, and Pass and Stow truly made the most of theirs. If you're enjoying this historical deep dive, please hit that like button. And be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next chapter. We'll explore the bell's role in the momentous events leading up to the Revolution. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today we're diving into Chapter 8, the second bell's voice. If you're just joining us, the legendary bell we've been following cracked on its very first test ring. A crushing disappointment, right? But the story doesn't end there. The people of Philadelphia weren't about to give up on their symbol. So what do you do with a giant cracked bell? You melt it down and start over. Two local foundry workers, John Pass and John Stow, took on the monumental task. Neither were expert bell makers, but they were determined. They broke the original bell into small pieces, melted them down, and added about 10% more copper, hoping to make the metal less brittle. Then they cast a new bell. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. The recast bell was hoisted up, and the city held its breath. It rang, and this time it didn't crack. The structure held, it was a success. The sound was ... different. Philadelphia citizens, never shy with their opinions, immediately started debating. Some complained it sounded too dull, while others argued it was too harsh. The tone just wasn't what they had expected. Pass and Stow, stung by the criticism, took the bell down again. They decided to give it one more try. They remelted their own creation and recast it for a third and final time. This is the bell we know today as the Liberty Bell. And its sound? Well, opinions were still mixed, but it was the bell they had. For years, it rang out over the city of Philadelphia. It was the sound that called lawmakers to their meetings at the Pennsylvania State House. It was the sound that marked momentous occasions, both joyous and solemn. From its shaky start, this bell, the one forged by Pass and Stow, became a constant, reliable voice in the daily life of the city. It wasn't perfect, and its tone might have been debated, but it was their asterisk bell. It called people together. It announced news, and it marked the steady rhythm of a growing nation. Think about it, every time that bell rang, it was a reminder of perseverance. A reminder that even when things don't go perfectly the first time, you can try again and create something enduring. This bell became more than just a timekeeper. It became woven into the very fabric of the community. Its chimes echoed through the streets, a familiar sound that everyone knew. It rang to celebrate victories and to mourn losses. It was the soundtrack to a pivotal era in American history, witnessing the conversations and debates that would shape a new country. The debates about its sound faded as its purpose grew stronger. It wasn't just about a perfect tone. It was about the message it carried and the community it served. So, while the initial casting was a failure, and the second attempt was a sonic disappointment to some, the bell that ultimately emerged was a testament to resilience. It's a powerful lesson, isn't it? Sometimes the things that are forged through trial and error, the things that bear the marks of their difficult creation, are the things that last the longest and mean the most. This bell, with its unique and debated voice, was ready for its role in history, a role far greater than anyone could have imagined. It was ready to ring for freedom. And that's where we'll leave it for today. The bell has found its voice, and it's ringing loud and clear over Philadelphia. What happens next is a story you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this piece of history, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter in our story. See you next time. As the 1760s bled into the 1770s, a palpable tension began to simmer across the 13 colonies. The once maternal embrace of Great Britain started to feel more like an iron grip. Acts of Parliament, taxes levied without representation, and the ever-present redcoats on colonial streets created a low, constant hum of discontent. In the heart of Philadelphia, a city buzzing with revolutionary fervor, the State House bell, once a simple timekeeper and announcer of civic events, began to find a new, more profound voice. It was transforming, note by note, into the voice of a nation in turmoil. Imagine the streets of Philadelphia in those years. The air wasn't just filled with the scent of coal smoke and horse-drawn carriages. It was thick with whispered conversations, with the rustle of smuggled pamphlets, with a sense of impending change. And punctuating this tense atmosphere was the tolling of the bell. Its peal, which once might have signaled the start of a market day, now carried a different weight. When it rang, people stopped. They looked up, they listened, and they gathered. The sound became a summons. The bell called citizens to public meetings in the State House yard, where impassioned orators would stand on makeshift stages, their voices rising and falling with the tide of revolutionary rhetoric. They spoke of rights, of liberty, of tyranny. And with each point made, each cheer from the crowd, the bell seemed to stand as a silent, bronze witness to the growing defiance. It wasn't just a bell anymore. It was the moderator of the biggest debate in the nation's young history. Its silence after a fiery speech was as potent as its ring, allowing the powerful words to settle in the minds of all who had gathered. But its role wasn't limited to planned gatherings. The bell became an alarm, a sentinel watching over the city. When news arrived of a new British imposition, like the infamous Stamp Act or the Townshend Acts, its urgent, clanging peals would rip through the city. This wasn't a gentle chime. It was a warning. It was the sound of a community being alerted to a shared threat. Doors would fly open and people would pour into the streets, their faces etched with concern and anger, all drawn together by that single, unifying sound. It was the colonial equivalent of a breaking news alert, and it ensured that no act of British authority went unnoticed or unchallenged by the populace. The bell also proclaimed the colonists' own declarations. When the First Continental Congress convened in 1774, a momentous step towards unified colonial action, its toll marked the occasion. It announced to the world that the colonies were no longer just a collection of disparate territories, but a body politic, capable of collective thought and action. Each ring was a defiant counterpoint to the proclamations of the Crown. While King George III issued his decrees from across an ocean, the colonists answered with the powerful, resonant voice of their own bell, a voice that was rooted in their land, in their shared experience. Think about the sound itself. A bell's ring is a complex thing. It starts with a sharp strike, the initial impact, much like the shock of the coercive acts. Then comes the swell, the rich, resonant tone that fills the air, echoing the way revolutionary ideas were spreading and growing stronger. And finally, there's the long, slow decay of the note, the reverberation that hangs in the air long after the initial toll. This lingering sound was like the memory of injustices, the spirit of resistance that didn't just disappear. It echoed in the taverns, in the churches, and in the homes of every Philadelphian. The bell tolled to mark the closure of the port of Boston, a collective cry of solidarity with their sister colony to the north. It rang out in mourning and in anger, each peal a promise that Massachusetts' plight would not be ignored. It rang to announce boycotts of British goods, transforming a commercial decision into a powerful political statement. With every swing of its clapper, the bell was weaving the fabric of a new identity. It was no longer just the Pennsylvania State House bell. It was becoming America's bell. Its voice was a constant companion to the men who would become the founding fathers. As Jefferson, Adams, and Franklin walked the streets of Philadelphia, debating the very nature of government and the rights of man, the bell's tolls were the soundtrack to their world-changing work. It marked the time as they labored late into the night, drafting petitions and declarations. Its sound seeped into the walls of Carpenter's Hall and the State House, a persistent reminder of the stakes, of the people outside who were counting on them, of the future they were attempting to forge. In this era of turmoil, the bell was an instrument of unity. It cut through the noise of a bustling city and the confusion of a chaotic time. It spoke a language everyone understood, regardless of their station in life. Whether you were a wealthy merchant, a humble artisan, or a fiery journalist, that sound meant something to you. It was a call to participate, to be aware, to be part of the monumental events unfolding. Each ring was another thread in the tapestry of revolution, binding the people together in a shared cause, a shared struggle, and a shared hope for something new. The bell, once a simple civic tool, had found its true purpose. It had become the resonant, unwavering heartbeat of a nation on the verge of birth. Its peals were no longer just marking the hours. They were marking the final turbulent moments before the dawn of independence. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next chapter. See you next time. Soft, evocative music begins. Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel where we dive deep into the stories that shaped our world. Today, we're traveling back in time, not just to a specific date, but to a specific sound. A sound that echoed through the cobblestone streets of Philadelphia and, in many ways, continues to echo through the heart of a nation. We're talking about the Liberty Bell and its legendary ringing on July 8, 1776. Close your eyes for a moment. Can you picture it? Philadelphia, in the summer of 1776. The air is thick, heavy with the July heat and the even heavier weight of revolution. Just 4 days earlier, on July 4th, a document was adopted that would change the course of history, the Declaration of Independence. But in an age without internet, without television, without even radio, how did the people hear the news? How did this revolutionary declaration make the leap from ink on parchment to a fire in the hearts of the common citizen? This is where our story truly begins, on Monday, July 8th. The city was buzzing, something was happening. A crowd began to gather in the State House yard, known today as Independence Square. They were people from all walks of life, merchants in their finest coats, artisans with calloused hands, shopkeepers, sailors, mothers holding the hands of their children. They were drawn by a promise, a summons carried on the wind. And then it happened. The great bell in the State House steeple began to ring. Its deep, resonant tone cut through the hum of the city. It wasn't an alarm for fire or a call to arms in the traditional sense. This was different. This was an invitation. Each peal of the bell seemed to say, "Gather round. Listen, a new chapter is beginning." It pulled people from their homes, from their workshops, from the docks. The crowd swelled, their faces a mixture of curiosity, hope, and perhaps a little bit of fear. What they were about to participate in was treason against the British crown. The stakes could not have been higher. Imagine standing in that crowd. The sun is warm on your skin. You can smell the dust from the unpaved streets and the sweet scent of summer blossoms. You're pressed in on all sides by your neighbors, a sea of anxious, expectant faces. Children are perched on their father's shoulders, craning their necks to get a better view. The atmosphere is electric, a tangible thing you could almost reach out and touch. The bell's ringing finally subsides, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. All eyes turn towards the observatory platform that had been erected for this very moment. Stepping onto the platform was Colonel John Nixon, a prominent figure in the city. In his hands he held a copy of the Declaration. The crowd hushed. You could have heard a pin drop. And then he began to read. His voice, strong and clear, carried across the square. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another. With every word, the air crackled with a new energy. These weren't just abstract political ideas. For the people listening, this was real. This was their lives, their future. When he read the list of grievances against King George III, you can imagine the nods of agreement, the murmurs of shared frustration rippling through the crowd. These were their own experiences being given a voice. They had felt the sting of taxes without representation, the injustice of laws imposed from an ocean away. And then came the most powerful words of all. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Liberty. The word hung in the hot summer air. It was the very idea that the bell itself would one day come to represent. As Colonel Nixon's voice declared the colonies free and independent states, a roar erupted from the crowd. It wasn't just a cheer. It was a collective exhale, a release of years of pent-up frustration and a bold, unified cry for a new beginning. Hats were thrown into the air. Strangers embraced. Tears of joy streamed down faces. In that moment, the abstract concept of independence became a shared emotional reality. They were no longer just colonists. They were Americans. After the reading, the celebration spilled out into the streets. The king's coat of arms was ceremoniously torn down from the State House and thrown into a massive bonfire. It was a symbolic act of defiance, a visual representation of the severing of old ties. The bell, having done its job of summoning the people, now stood as a silent witness to the birth of a nation's spirit. Now, historians debate the details of this day. Some argue the story of the bell ringing specifically to call people to the reading has been embellished over time, becoming more myth than documented fact. The famous story of the young boy yelling to the old bell ringer, "Ring, grandfather, ring," was actually penned decades later by the writer George Lippard. He captured the spirit of the day, even if he took some creative liberties. But whether every detail of the story is provably true misses the larger point. The story endures because it speaks to a fundamental truth. On July 8, 1776, the ideas of the Declaration of Independence were given to the people. The sound of that bell, whether a literal call or a symbolic one, became inextricably linked with the sound of liberty itself. It represents that crucial moment when a government of by and for the people began to take shape. Not in a quiet closed-door meeting, but out in the open, with the resounding approval of the citizens. That bell, which we now call the Liberty Bell, would go on to become one of the most cherished symbols of American freedom. Its famous crack only adds to its character, a reminder that liberty is often fragile and must be protected. It rang for the birth of a nation, and its story continues to ring in the hearts of people who believe in the enduring power of freedom and self-determination. The sound of July 8, 1776, wasn't just the sound of metal striking metal. It was the sound of a new world being born. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as moving as I do, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more dives into the pivotal moments of our shared history. We love hearing from you, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Until next time, stay curious. Welcome back to our journey through history, where objects tell tales as grand as any human saga. Today, we're diving into a lesser-known, yet incredibly profound chapter in the life of a national icon, the Liberty Bell. We often think of it ringing out, a symbol of proclamation and celebration. But what about the time it fell silent? This is the story of the bell's great escape and its quiet, patient vigil during the darkest days of the American Revolution. Picture this. It's 1777. The revolutionary spirit is blazing, but the war is far from won. The British Army, a formidable force, is marching on Philadelphia, the heart of the rebellion and the home of the Continental Congress. General George Washington's army has just suffered defeats at Brandywine and Paoli. The city is in a state of panic. The British are coming, and they have a specific goal beyond just capturing the city. They want to seize every bell they can find. Why bells? Well, in the 18th century, bells were a massive source of metal, specifically bronze. And what's bronze perfect for? Melting down and casting into cannons and ammunition. The British knew that silencing the city's bells wasn't just a symbolic act of dominance. It was a strategic move to disarm the colonists, turning their own symbols of community and freedom into weapons against them. Imagine the irony. The very bell that proclaimed liberty would be melted to forge the instruments of oppression. The patriots in Philadelphia knew they couldn't let this happen. Especially not to their state house bell, the one we now call the Liberty Bell. It had become more than just a bell. It was the voice of their aspirations. So a daring plan was hatched. Amidst the chaos of a city being evacuated, a secret mission was underway to save the bells. Under the cover of secrecy, the Liberty Bell, along with 10 other prominent bells from the city's churches and public buildings, was carefully lowered from its steeple. This was no small feat. The Liberty Bell alone weighed over 2,000 pounds. It was loaded onto a heavy wagon, part of a long, slow-moving convoy of military supplies and equipment heading north out of the city. The man often credited with overseeing this particular wagon was a German-American farmer named John Jacob Mickley. The journey was perilous. The roads were rough, muddy, and clogged with people fleeing the city. British patrols were a constant threat. The convoy had to move cautiously, often under the cover of darkness, to avoid detection. Can you imagine the tension? A wagon, creaking under the weight of this massive bronze symbol, trundling through the Pennsylvania countryside, every sound a potential giveaway. The bell, usually a source of loud, clear tones, now had to be completely silent, muffled and hidden under piles of hay or potatoes to disguise its precious cargo. Their destination was a small, predominantly German-speaking town about 55 miles north of Philadelphia, Northampton Town, which we know today as Allentown. But the journey wasn't smooth. Legend has it that the heavy wagon carrying the Liberty Bell broke down in Bethlehem. The bell had to be transferred to another wagon for the final leg of its journey. The precious cargo finally arrived in Allentown, a safe haven far from the British advance. But where do you hide a 1-ton bell in a small town? The answer was ingenious. The Zion's German Reformed Church, right in the center of town, became its sanctuary. The church's pastor, Abraham Bloomer, was a staunch patriot. Under his watch, the floorboards of the church were pried up, and the Liberty Bell, along with the other bells from Philadelphia, was carefully lowered into the dark earthen cellar below. The floorboards were replaced, and just like that, the bell vanished. For nearly a year, from September 1777 to June 1778, the Liberty Bell lay buried in silence beneath the church floor. Above it, life went on. The church was even used as a makeshift hospital for Continental soldiers wounded in the war. These soldiers, recovering from their battles, had no idea that the very symbol of the liberty they were fighting for rested just a few feet beneath them. It's a powerful image. The silent bell, waiting underground, while the struggle for freedom raged on the surface. This period of silence is a crucial part of the bell's story. It wasn't ringing, but its symbolic power was perhaps stronger than ever. It represented resilience, the determination to protect what is precious, even if it means hiding it away. It was a silent promise that one day, the war would end, the British would be gone, and the bell would return to its rightful place to once again ring out for a truly free nation. It was a quiet act of defiance, a testament to the idea that some things are too important to be lost, too sacred to be surrendered. Finally, in June of 1778, the tide turned. The British evacuated Philadelphia. The city was once again in American hands. Word was sent to Allentown that it was safe to return the bells. The floorboards of the Zion's church were lifted once more, and the Liberty Bell was brought out from its subterranean hiding place. It was loaded back onto a wagon and began its journey home. When it was rehung in the steeple of the State House, now known as Independence Hall, it wasn't just the return of a bell, it was the return of hope. Its silence had been a necessary sacrifice, a pause in its long story. But now it was back, ready to witness the birth of the United States and to become the enduring emblem of liberty we cherish today. The next time you see an image of the Liberty Bell, remember not only the times it rang loud and clear, but also the time it fell silent too. Survive patiently waiting in the dark, guarding the promise of freedom for future generations. Thanks for joining me on this incredible piece of hidden history. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell, pun intended, so you don't miss our next chapter. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we're diving into Chapter 12, The Return to Philadelphia. Picture this. The dust of the Revolutionary War is finally settling. The cannons have fallen silent, and a new nation is breathing its first tentative breaths. And amidst this dawn of a new era, a familiar symbol is making its way back home. Yes, the State House bell, the one we now cherish as the Liberty Bell, is returning to Philadelphia. It had been hidden away, kept safe from the ravages of war, tucked away in the Zion German Reformed Church in Allentown. Now, with the threat gone, it was time for its homecoming. The journey back wasn't a grand parade. It was a quiet, steady return, much like the nation itself was slowly, piece by piece, coming back together. Imagine the scene as the bell was carefully hoisted back into the steeple of the Pennsylvania State House, now known as Independence Hall. The city of Philadelphia, which had been a hotbed of revolutionary fervor, a nerve center for rebellion and debate, was beginning to transform. The air, once thick with the tension of war and the passionate cries for freedom, was now filled with a sense of relief and the monumental task of nation-building. The people of Philadelphia would have gathered, curious to hear its voice once more. After years of silence, the bell was rung. But the sound that echoed through the streets was not the same pristine, clear tone it once had. It was different, flawed, some might even say imperfect. A small crack, a testament to its journeys and its trials, had begun to alter its voice forever. But this imperfection didn't diminish its significance. In fact, it enhanced it. That changed tone, that slightly dissonant ring, became a powerful metaphor. It was the sound of survival. It was the sound of a nation that had been through the fire, that was scarred but not broken. Just like the new United States, the bell was imperfect. It had its flaws, but it had endured. It carried within its metallic shell the spirit of resilience, the story of a struggle won. This return marked a pivotal shift for Philadelphia. The city was slowly transitioning from a center of active rebellion to a center of remembrance. The halls that once echoed with the urgent debates of the Continental Congress would now become hallowed grounds, places where future generations would come to reflect on the price of liberty. Independence Hall and the bell within it were becoming relics, sacred objects that embodied the very soul of the nation's founding. The bell wasn't just a bell anymore, it was a witness. It had seen the birth of a revolution. It had been silenced and hidden for its own protection, just as the ideals of liberty had been fiercely guarded. And now its return and its imperfect voice served as a constant, tangible reminder of the journey. It wasn't just about celebrating a victory. It was about remembering the struggle, the sacrifices, and the incredible, almost impossible, feat of creating a new country. As the years went by, the crack would grow and the bell's voice would change even more. But its role as a symbol only intensified. Each toll, however, flawed, was a connection to the past, a story whispered on the wind. It reminded people that freedom isn't a perfect, flawless concept. It's something that has to be fought for, protected, and sometimes it comes out of the battle a little bit scarred, a little bit changed, but stronger for it. The people of Philadelphia, and indeed all Americans, began to look at the bell differently. It was no longer just a functional object to call assemblies or mark occasions. It was becoming an icon, a pilgrimage site. The city itself, the cradle of liberty, was now also its museum, its memorial. The return of the bell was the beginning of this transformation, turning a site of action into a site of memory. And this is a crucial part of any nation's story. The moment when the fight ends and the remembering begins. It's the point where you take the tools of revolution and place them carefully in a display case, not to forget them but to honor them, to learn from them, and to ensure that the spirit they represent is never ever lost. The imperfect bell, back in its Philadelphia home, was the first and perhaps most powerful artifact in this new museum of American memory. Its tone was a constant reminder that the past was real, messy, and hard-won. It didn't ring with a triumphant, perfect peal, but with the honest, resonant voice of experience. It was the sound of a survivor, and in its return, Philadelphia solidified its new role as the keeper of the nation's founding story. A story of rebellion, survival, and the enduring, imperfect, and beautiful spirit of liberty. Thank you so much for joining me on this chapter of our historical exploration. It's a powerful reminder that our most cherished symbols often carry the marks of their journey. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into history, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'll see you next time. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today we're diving into Chapter 13, The Crack Deepens. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, the Liberty Bell, once a powerful symbol of unity and defiance, was beginning to show its age. Time, as it does with all things, was taking its toll. The metal, once strong and resonant, was growing weary. Imagine Philadelphia in the early 1800s. The nation is young, vibrant, and finding its footing. The bell is still a central part of city life, called upon to mark solemn occasions, celebrate victories, and mourn losses. But with each toll, a hidden vulnerability was growing. The small fissure, a tiny imperfection from its very beginnings, was being stressed. Each vibration, each powerful ring that sent sound waves across the city, was like a tiny hammer, slowly, almost imperceptibly, widening that initial flaw. Think of it like a small crack in a frozen lake. At first, it's barely noticeable. But with every shift, every change in temperature, every bit of pressure, it spreads. The bell was experiencing the same slow, relentless process. The very act that gave it its voice and its purpose, the ringing, was also its undoing. The joyous peals for celebrations and the somber tolls for funerals were all contributing to its decline. The people of Philadelphia likely didn't notice at first. The sound might have changed subtly, a slight dissonance that only a trained ear could catch. But physically, the scar was becoming more apparent. It was no longer just a hairline fracture. It was a visible crack, a wound on the bronze surface of this national icon. This physical crack was becoming a powerful symbol in itself. Just as the nation was experiencing its own growing pains, its own internal divisions and debates over issues like slavery and states' rights, the bell was mirroring that tension. This period, from roughly 1800 to the 1840s, is when the bell's most famous feature truly began to define it. It was transforming from a functional instrument into a historical artifact, its story now inextricably linked with this mark of imperfection. The crack was a physical testament to its long service. It had rung for the Declaration of Independence, it had called citizens to hear news of the Revolution, and it had celebrated the birth of the Constitution. All of that history was now etched into its very structure. It wasn't just one single event, but the accumulation of decades of use. Every 4th of July, every presidential inauguration celebrated in Philadelphia, every significant public gathering added to the stress. The bell was a workhorse, and its workload was beginning to break it. The citizens who cared for it were faced with a dilemma: to use the bell and risk its destruction, or to silence it and lose its powerful voice. This growing fissure also symbolized the fragility of the young republic. The ideals of liberty and freedom, so perfectly encapsulated by the bell's inscription, were also being tested. The unity that the bell once represented was facing deep-seated challenges. The crack served as a constant, visible reminder that the American experiment was not guaranteed, that it required constant care and attention to prevent it from shattering. As the years went by, the crack became a part of the bell's identity. People would come to see not just the bell, but the crack itself. It told a story of resilience, of bearing scars from a long and storied past. It showed that even a symbol of strength could be vulnerable, that perfection is rare, but endurance is what truly matters. The bell was no longer just a herald. It was a historian, telling its own life story through the ever-deepening line that marred its surface. We often think the crack happened in one dramatic moment, but the truth is far more poignant. It was a slow, gradual process, a story of time and pressure. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest changes happen not with a bang, but with a quiet, persistent strain over many, many years. The bell was carrying the weight of a nation's history, and that weight was literally beginning to break it. Join us next time as we explore the final fateful ring that would silence the Liberty Bell forever, and its subsequent transformation into the revered relic we know today. What was the event that caused the final irreparable damage? The answer is coming up. Thanks so much for watching and sharing this piece of history with us. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell gently, of course, so you won't miss our next chapter. We'll see you in the next video. Imagine this. It's the 1830s, or perhaps the early 1840s. The air is crisp, filled with patriotic fervor. Across Philadelphia, people are gathering, preparing to celebrate the birthday of a man who has become a legend, a symbol of the nation itself, George Washington. This isn't just any birthday party. It's a citywide, heart-swelling tribute to the father of the country. And at the center of it all, poised to lead the chorus of celebration, is our old friend, the State House bell. By now, the bell has seen it all. It has announced the birth of a nation, mourned its heroes, and called its citizens to action time and time again. It's more than just metal. It's a voice, a constant companion through the turbulent early years of the United States. Its tolls are woven into the very fabric of Philadelphia's history. On this particular day, as the city prepared to honor Washington, the bell was called upon once more. Its job was simple, to ring out loud and clear in a joyous, resounding tribute. As the ropes were pulled, a familiar deep tone began to resonate from the State House steeple. It was a sound that had brought comfort, news, and inspiration to generations. The crowd below would have listened, their chests swelling with pride. The sound echoed through the cobbled streets, past the brick townhouses, and over the bustling markets. It was the sound of America celebrating one of its own. But on one of those powerful celebratory pulls, something went terribly wrong. Amidst the jubilant peals, a sharp, dissonant sound tore through the air, a jarring interruption to the familiar melody. The bell ringers would have stopped, confused. The crowd would have looked up, a sense of unease creeping in. Up in the belfry, a new dark line had appeared on the bell's bronze surface. The old hairline fracture, the one that had been a minor blemish for decades, had finally given way under the strain. A massive zigzagging crack now stretched across its body. The vibrant, resonant tone was gone, replaced by a dull, broken thud. This wasn't a minor flaw that could be filed down or ignored. This was a catastrophic failure. The crack ran deep, silencing the bell's powerful voice forever. That toll meant to honor George Washington became its last, the final, echoing note of its long and storied service. It was a poignant, almost poetic end. The bell that had proclaimed liberty throughout the land was now broken, its voice silenced during a celebration for the very man who led the fight for that liberty. It was a moment of profound symbolism, though perhaps not fully appreciated at the time. The city of Philadelphia was faced with a dilemma. What do you do with a broken icon? The bell could no longer fulfill its primary function. Its days of calling citizens, announcing news, or ringing in celebrations were over. Some might have suggested melting it down, recasting it, and trying again, just as they had done a century earlier. But this bell was different. It wasn't just any bell. It was the asterisk bell. It had been there for the Declaration of Independence. It had rung for the Constitution. Its history was too rich, too intertwined with the nation's own story to simply be erased and reforged. So, decision was made, the bell would be preserved. Its silence became a new kind of statement. The crack, once seen as a flaw, began to transform into its most recognizable feature. It became a scar, a battle wound, a physical testament to its long years of service. It was a reminder that even the most powerful symbols of freedom are fragile, that they must be cared for and protected. The bell was carefully taken down from the steeple, its ringing days officially behind it. But its journey was far from over. In fact, its retirement marked the beginning of a new chapter. The bell transitioned from being a functional object to a revered artifact. It was no longer a tool, but a monument. People began to see it not just for the sound it made, but for what it represented. The crack wasn't a sign of failure, but a mark of history. It told a story of time, of stress, of dedicated service that eventually led to a dignified, albeit broken, silence. The bell became an object of pilgrimage, a tangible link to the nation's founding generation. Think about the irony. For nearly a century, its importance was in its voice. Now, its importance lay in its silence. The silence allowed people to project their own hopes, dreams, and interpretations of liberty onto it. The visible, jagged crack became a focal point for contemplation. It represented the divisions and struggles the nation had endured and would continue to face. The bell, in its broken state, became an even more powerful symbol of a nation that was itself imperfect, flawed, but enduring. It stood for the idea that even with cracks, with imperfections, unity and liberty could prevail. This final fateful ring for Washington's birthday cemented the bell's legendary status. It was the dramatic final act in its life as a working instrument. From that day forward, it would be known not just as the State House bell, but as something more. It would soon be christened with a new name, one that would carry its legacy into the future and make it one of the most beloved symbols in the entire world, the Liberty Bell. Its silence would speak louder than its toll ever could, echoing the promise of freedom for generations to come. Thank you so much for joining me on this part of our journey through the history of this incredible artifact. It's a story of purpose, service, and ultimately, a beautiful, symbolic silence. If you're enjoying this series, please give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. We have so much more to uncover. See you next time. Have you ever thought about how something broken can become more powerful than it ever was when it was whole? That's the incredible story of the Liberty Bell. It is a story about how a simple object transformed into one of America's most cherished icons. The bell we know today wasn't the first one. The original bell, ordered from London in 1751 for the Pennsylvania State House, now Independence Hall, cracked on its very first test ring. Imagine the disappointment. So local craftsmen John Pass and John Stow were tasked with recasting it. They melted down the original and tried again, but the new sound wasn't quite right. They had to melt it down and recast it a second time. This third version is the bell we see today. For years, it rang out for important public announcements, calling the citizens of Philadelphia together. The famous inscription on the bell reads, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." This powerful line comes from the Bible, from the book of Leviticus. It was chosen by Isaac Norris, the Speaker of the Pennsylvania Assembly, to commemorate the 50th anniversary of William Penn's 1701 Charter of Privileges, which granted religious freedoms to the colony. At the time, liberty was more about religious freedom and the right to self-governance within the British Empire, not yet the revolutionary call it would later become. So when did the bell become the asterisk Liberty Bell? Contrary to popular belief, it almost certainly did not ring on July 4, 1776, to announce the Declaration of Independence. The State House steeple was in poor condition and the bell was likely silenced for safety, but its inscription was prophetic. The ideals of liberty it proclaimed were exactly what the new nation was fighting for. The famous crack we see today is a bit of a mystery. The most accepted story is that it developed sometime in the early 1840s. The bell was rung for various occasions, and the thin crack slowly grew. The final, fatal blow came in February 1846. The city decided to ring the bell for George Washington's birthday celebration. It rang loud and clear for a while, but then the crack suddenly lengthened, silencing the bell forever. From that day on, it could never ring again. You might think that's the end of the story, a broken, useless bell. But this is where it truly begins. In the decades leading up to the Civil War, the abolitionist movement was gaining strength. They were fighting to end the institution of slavery, to extend liberty to all inhabitants of the land. In the 1830s, an anti-slavery publication called The Liberator seized upon the bell's inscription. They started calling it the Liberty Bell, turning it into a powerful symbol for their cause. The broken bell, they argued, was a perfect metaphor for a nation that proclaimed liberty but practiced slavery, a nation broken by hypocrisy. Its silence became its new voice. It no longer needed to ring to be heard. Its cracked form spoke volumes. After the Civil War, the bell's meaning expanded even further. It was no longer just about abolition. It became a symbol of national unity and resilience. America had been torn apart by war, but like the bell, it had endured. To help heal the country's wounds and foster a sense of shared identity, the Liberty Bell went on tour. From the 1880s to the early 1900s, it traveled across the country by train. Millions of Americans from small towns to big cities lined the tracks to catch a glimpse of this piece of history. For many, it was the first time they had seen a tangible link to the nation's founding. It became a traveling ambassador of patriotism, reminding everyone of the common ideals that bound them together. The bell's image started appearing everywhere on postcards, souvenirs, and in political cartoons. Each group projected its own hopes and struggles onto it. During the women's suffrage movement, activists created a replica called the Justice Bell, which was chained silent until women won the right to vote. During World War I and II, the bell was a symbol of the freedom that America was fighting to defend. Throughout the civil rights movement of the 20th century, it was once again a potent symbol, a reminder of the still unfulfilled promise of liberty and justice for all. Today, the Liberty Bell sits in its own pavilion in Philadelphia, right across from Independence Hall. It's no longer just a bell from Pennsylvania. It's America's bell. Its silence is profound. It invites us to reflect. We look at the crack and see the nation's imperfections, its struggles, and the times it has fallen short of its ideals. But we also see its resilience. We see a promise that, despite being fractured, the nation can endure and strive to become a more perfect union. The journey of the Liberty Bell is a powerful lesson. It shows us that history is not just a collection of facts, but a story we tell ourselves. It is a story about how we find meaning in our past and how symbols can unite us, challenge us, and inspire us to keep working towards the promise of liberty for everyone. The bell's silence is its strength, a quiet but constant reminder of the enduring, and sometimes difficult, journey of a nation. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments what the Liberty Bell means to you. See you next time. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about an icon, a massive cracked bronze bell that has become one of the most recognizable symbols of American freedom. Of course, I'm talking about the Liberty Bell. We all know the story, right? It rang out on July 4th, 1776, to announce the Declaration of Independence. Well, what if I told you that's not exactly true? The popular story we all know is more legend than fact. The bell's real journey to fame, its transformation from a simple state house bell into the Liberty Bell, is far more complex and, frankly, far more powerful. It's a story not just about national independence, but about a profound moral struggle for the very soul of the nation. So grab a seat, because today we uncovering how a group of determined activists in the 1830s gave this old bell a new name and a revolutionary new purpose. Before the 1830s, nobody called it the Liberty Bell. It was simply the State House bell, hanging in the steeple of the Pennsylvania State House, what we now call Independence Hall. It was ordered in 1751 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of William Penn's Charter of Privileges, which was Pennsylvania's original constitution. And yes, it had an inscription on it, a quote from the Bible, Leviticus 25:10. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. This quote was chosen to celebrate the religious freedoms and political liberties granted by Penn's charter. The bell rang for important events, the first reading of the Declaration, for example, but it was just one of many bells in Philadelphia. It wasn't particularly special yet. It even developed its famous crack sometime in the early 19th century and was mostly sitting in silence, its ringing days seemingly over. It was, for all intents and purposes, a retired piece of local history. But that was all about to change, thanks to a movement that would redefine the meaning of liberty in America. Enter the abolitionists. By the 1830s, the anti-slavery movement was gaining serious momentum. These weren't just politicians debating in Congress. These were passionate, everyday people, writers, preachers, escaped slaves, and free black citizens who saw the hypocrisy at the heart of the United States. How could a nation founded on the principle that all men are created equal hold millions of people in brutal bondage? They needed a symbol, something that could cut through the political noise and speak directly to the conscience of the American people. They found it gathering dust in the Philadelphia State House. The abolitionists seized upon the bell's inscription, Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. They saw the profound and frankly unfulfilled promise in those words. For them, all the inhabitants didn't mean just white landowning men, it meant everyone. It meant the enslaved men, women, and children toiling on plantations in the South. They argued that the bell's inscription was a divine and national mandate to end slavery. It wasn't just a historical artifact. It was a prophecy waiting to be fulfilled. This was a brilliant move. They were using America's own founding ideals and symbols against the institution of slavery, reframing the debate as a fight to realize the country's true promise. The first known use of the name Liberty Bell in this context came from a pamphlet published by the New York Anti-Slavery Society in 1835. It was titled The Liberty Bell. Suddenly, this old cracked bell had a new name and a powerful new identity. Abolitionist publications, like William Lloyd Garrison's influential newspaper, The Liberator, began to feature poems, essays, and illustrations of the bell. They printed images of it, often with chains breaking around it, making it an instantly recognizable emblem of their cause. The bell became a silent but powerful advocate, its biblical inscription a constant thundering rebuke to the slaveholding states. It was no longer just a bell. It had become a moral statement. It symbolized the broken promise of American freedom, with its crack representing a nation fractured by the sin of slavery. This rebranding was incredibly effective. The abolitionists were masters of public relations, using mass media, the newspapers, pamphlets, and books of their day to spread their message. The name Liberty Bell stuck. It was catchy, evocative, and deeply patriotic. It allowed them to position themselves not as radicals trying to tear the country apart, but as true patriots trying to make the country live up to its founding creed. They were the ones who truly understood what liberty for all meant. The bell's image began to appear everywhere in abolitionist circles, becoming a shorthand for the entire movement. When you saw the Liberty Bell, you knew it meant the fight for emancipation. It transformed the bell from a local Philadelphia artifact into a national symbol of the struggle for human rights. As the abolitionist movement grew, so did the fame of the Liberty Bell. The narrative they created was so powerful that it began to overshadow the bell's original history. People started to believe the legend that it had rung on July 4, 1776, because that story fits so perfectly with its new role as a symbol of freedom. This legend was popularized in the mid-19th century by writers who were sympathetic to the abolitionist cause. The story of the bell ringing for independence was a powerful myth that reinforced the idea that the nation was founded on the principle of universal liberty, a principle that slavery directly violated. The abolitionists had not only named the bell, they had given it a new, more potent origin story that resonated with millions of Americans. So, when you see the Liberty Bell today, remember that its journey to iconic status wasn't straightforward. It didn't become a beloved national symbol simply because of 1776. It was adopted, repurposed, and named by a group of brave activists who were fighting one of the greatest moral battles in American history. They took a silent, broken object and gave it a voice that thundered against injustice. They reminded the nation of the promise engraved on its surface: proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. They made the bell more than just a piece of metal. They made it a symbol of a more perfect union, a future where liberty truly was for all. The crack, once a sign of imperfection, came to represent a nation divided, a promise broken, but one that could, with struggle and determination, still be healed. It's a powerful reminder that symbols are not static. Their meanings evolve, and they are often defined by the people who use them to fight for what they believe in. The Liberty Bell is famous today, not just because of the founders, but because of the abolitionists who dared to demand that America live up to its highest ideals. They heard a call to action in its silent, cracked form, and their call echoes to this day, reminding us that the work of proclaiming liberty is never truly finished. Thanks so much for watching. It is a piece of history that I think adds so much depth to a symbol we all think we know. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button, and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the stories behind the symbols that shape our world. Drop a comment below. Did you know this story behind the Liberty Bell's name? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious. Sound of a steam train whistle and chugging wheels fades into the background. Hello, history lovers, and welcome back. Today we're hopping on a train, but not just any train. We're traveling back to the late 19th century to follow one of America's most iconic symbols on an unprecedented journey. That's right, we're talking about the Liberty Bell's Great American Tour. Now you might picture the Liberty Bell sitting quietly in Philadelphia, which it does today. But there was a time when this silent, cracked behemoth became the nation's biggest rock star, touring the country by rail. After the Civil War, America was a nation healing its wounds, striving for unity. Leaders were looking for symbols that could bring people together, reminding them of their shared past and a hopeful future. What better symbol than the bell that had proclaimed liberty decades earlier? So starting in the 1880s, the decision was made. The Liberty Bell was carefully loaded onto a specially designed, ornate flat car, often decorated with patriotic banners and flags. They called it the Liberty Bell train. This wasn't just a simple transport. It was a rolling exhibition, a mobile shrine to American ideals. Its mission? To travel from city to town, from the bustling hubs of the North to the rebuilding heart of the South, and all the way to the burgeoning West. The first major trip was to the World's Industrial and Cotton Centennial Exposition in New Orleans in 1885. This was a massive undertaking. Think about the logistics. Moving a 2,000-pound bronze bell, especially one with a famous crack, was a delicate operation. Engineers had to ensure the train car could handle the weight, and that the journey's vibrations wouldn't cause further damage. The bell was mounted on a massive timber frame, a spider of rods holding it securely in place, allowing people to see it from all angles. And see it? They did. The reaction was nothing short of astonishing. As the Liberty Bell train chugged across the states, news of its coming would travel ahead. In an era before instant media, this was a major event. Entire towns would shut down. Schools would let out, businesses would close, and people from miles around would flock to the railroad tracks. Imagine standing in a massive crowd, the air buzzing with anticipation, just to catch a glimpse of a silent, stationary object. When the train pulled into a station, the scene was electric. Mayors would give speeches. Bands would play patriotic tunes like Yankee Doodle and the Star-Spangled Banner, and veterans, both Union and Confederate, would stand side by side, often reaching out to touch the bell. For many, it was a deeply emotional, almost spiritual experience. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a tangible link to the Founding Fathers, to the very birth of their nation. Children were often lifted up by their parents to touch its weathered surface or even kiss it. People would bring flowers to lay on the platform. They would press souvenirs against it, hoping to imbue them with some of its historic significance. In many towns, the bell would be paraded through the streets on a wagon pulled by horses, a slow, solemn procession that allowed even more people to witness it up close. The journey to New Orleans was just the beginning. The bell would go on to visit Chicago for the World's Columbian Exposition in 1893, Atlanta in 1895, Charleston in 1902, and even Boston for the anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill in 1903. Each trip drew millions of spectators. On its way to San Francisco for the Panama Pacific International Exposition in 1915, an estimated 17 million people saw the bell. That's nearly 1/5 of the entire U.S. population at the time. What's so powerful about this story is how the bell's meaning evolved. It was no longer just a symbol of the revolution. On these tours, especially through the South, it became a powerful emblem of national reconciliation. In a country still deeply scarred by the Civil War, this shared icon from a time before the division helped bridge the gap. It reminded everyone that they were all Americans, part of a single, unified story. It stood for endurance, cracked, yet still standing, much like the nation itself. These tours also connected the rapidly expanding country. For people in far-flung territories and newly formed states in the West, the arrival of the Liberty Bell was a profound validation. It was Philadelphia, the heart of the original 13 colonies, reaching out to them saying, "You are a part of this too." It helped weave the new frontiers into the old national fabric. Of course, the tours weren't without their critics. With each journey, concerns about the bell's fragile condition grew. Experts worried that the constant travel and the vibrations from the train were widening the famous crack. Souvenir hunters were also a problem. People would chip off tiny pieces of the bell as mementos. This led to the bell being placed under 24-hour guard during its travels. Eventually, the risks became too great. After its trip to San Francisco in 1915, officials decided that the bell's touring days were over. The potential for irreversible damage was just too high. The Grand National Tour had come to an end, and the Liberty Bell returned to Philadelphia for good, to rest as a stationary monument. But the legacy of those tours is immense. For 3 decades, the Liberty Bell wasn't just a relic in a museum. It was an active participant in American life. It moved, it traveled, and it met the American people where they were. Even in its silence, the Liberty Bell spoke volumes. It preached a message of unity, heritage, and shared identity to a generation of Americans who desperately needed to hear it. It proved that a symbol, even a cracked and silent one, has the incredible power to bring a nation together. The next time you see a picture of the Liberty Bell, don't just think of it sitting in its pavilion. Picture it on the back of that train, rolling through the vast American landscape, with crowds cheering on the tracks and a nation rediscovering its soul. It's a testament to the enduring power of our shared symbols. Thank you so much for joining me on this historical journey today. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the fascinating chapters of our past. Let me know in the comments what historical topic you'd like to see next. Until then, stay curious. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we arrive at the final poignant chapter in the long and storied life of the Liberty Bell. Its homecoming. After years of touring, of being a celebrity on the rails, the time had come for the Bell to settle down. The nation decided its travels were over, and it was time for this American icon to return home for good. And where else could its final resting place be but Philadelphia, the very city where its story began? Imagine the sentiment in the air as the Bell made its last journey back to the city of brotherly love. It wasn't just a piece of metal returning. It was a living piece of American history, a witness to the birth of a nation, coming home to rest. The decision was made to give it a place of honor, a permanent home where it could be both protected and admired by generations to come. This wasn't going to be just any display. It had to be a shrine worthy of its stature. The location chosen was perfect, right in the heart of the most historic square mile in America, near Independence Hall. This is where the Declaration of Independence was debated and adopted, where the Constitution was signed, and where the bell itself first rang out, or at least was supposed to. Placing it here was like completing a circle, bringing the symbol of liberty back to the cradle of liberty. It was a powerful statement, connecting the past, present, and future of the American experiment. So, how do you house a national treasure? The Bell couldn't just be left out in the open anymore. Its travels had taken a toll, and its famous crack was a constant reminder of its fragility. The solution was to create a dedicated space for it, a place where it could be enclosed and shielded from the elements, and from the wear and tear of millions of adoring hands. A new structure, the Liberty Bell Pavilion, was eventually built, designed specifically to showcase the Bell while keeping it safe. Inside its new home, the Bell was no longer an active participant in history, but a silent guardian of it. It was encased, protected, and revered. Think of it like a wise old grandparent, retired from the hustle and bustle, now sitting peacefully, full of stories for anyone who will listen. Visitors could no longer touch it, but they could get closer than ever to its spirit. They could stand before it, look at the intricate details, read its powerful inscription, and feel the weight of its history. The atmosphere around the Bell transformed. It was no longer a noisy celebrity on tour, but a quiet, contemplative monument. People would line up, waiting patiently for their turn to stand in its presence. The mood was one of reverence. You could see it on their faces, a sense of awe and respect. For many, it was a pilgrimage. They came from all over the country, and indeed all over the world, to see the Bell that represented so much. It became a silent teacher. School children would press their faces against the glass, their teachers explaining the significance of the crack, the meaning of the words, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." It wasn't just a history lesson, it was a civics lesson. The Bell, in its silence, spoke volumes about freedom, about the struggles to achieve it, and the responsibility to maintain it. It was, and is, a silent guardian of American memory. The Bell's homecoming marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Its days of travel were over, but its mission was far from complete. Now, instead of going to the people came to it. It became a fixed point, a North Star and the constellation of American symbols. Its permanent home ensured that its story would not be forgotten, that its message would continue to resonate, even without a single chime. Every day, thousands of people walk past it. They see the jagged crack, a symbol of imperfection, which in a way makes it even more American. Our history isn't perfect. Our journey toward a more perfect union is ongoing. The Bell, with its beautiful flaw, represents that. It's a reminder that even broken things can become symbols of strength and resilience. It's a testament to the idea that our imperfections don't disqualify us. They are part of our story, and so the Liberty Bell rests. It has seen revolution, celebration, division, and reunion. It has traveled thousands of miles and been seen by millions of eyes. Now it stands in quiet dignity, just a stone's throw from where it all began. It's a silent witness, a constant reminder of the price of freedom and the enduring power of an idea. Its journey is complete, but its story continues with every person who stands before it and reflects on the meaning of liberty. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through the life of the Liberty Bell. It's a story that belongs to all of us. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more stories like this one. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, stay curious. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we read diving deep into a story that is literally etched in metal and rings through the annals of history. We're talking about the Liberty Bell and the profound poetic irony of its famous crack. Let's set the stage. It's the mid-18th century in Philadelphia. A massive bronze bell is commissioned for the Pennsylvania State House, what we now call Independence Hall. Its purpose? To call lawmakers to their meetings, to alert citizens to public proclamations, and to celebrate momentous occasions. Engraved on its side are words from Leviticus. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. This wasn't just any bell. It was destined to be a symbol of freedom, a voice for a new nation's aspirations. But here's where the story takes its first unexpected turn. The bell, meant to ring out with a clear, resonant tone, cracked on its very first test ring after arriving in Philadelphia from London. Imagine the disappointment. The symbol of perfection, of a clear and unwavering call to liberty, was flawed from the very beginning. Local craftsmen John Pass and John Stow were tasked with fixing it. They melted it down and recast it, not once, but twice. For a while their work held. The bell rang for significant events, including, as legend has it, the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence on July 8, 1776. Became the voice of a fledgling nation, its peals echoing the birth of a new era. For nearly a century, the bell served its purpose. But then, sometime in the 1840s, a thin crack appeared. The exact cause is still debated by historians. Some say it happened while tolling for the death of Chief Justice John Marshall in 1835. Others point to its ringing for George Washington's birthday celebration in 1846. The story goes that citizens wanted to hear the bell one last time for Washington's birthday. They rang it, and the existing thin crack widened into the massive fissure we see today, silencing the bell forever. And here lies the beautiful, profound irony. The very instrument created to proclaim liberty, to be a perfect, unwavering symbol, was broken the moment its legacy was truly being forged. It failed its most basic function, to ring. A perfect bell would have just been a bell. A loud, functional, but ultimately unremarkable object. But this bell, in its brokenness, became something far more powerful. Think about it. The crack is what makes the Liberty Bell iconic. It's what draws millions of visitors to gaze upon it. It's what makes it instantly recognizable. The crack is a scar, a mark of history, a testament to a long and storied life. It tells a story of imperfection, of trial, and of resilience. Isn't that a far more accurate and powerful metaphor for liberty itself? Liberty isn't a perfect, flawless concept delivered to us on a silver platter. It's a struggle. It's messy. It's something that has been fought for, broken, mended, and fought for again. The history of the United States, the very nation this bell symbolizes, is not a story of unbroken perfection. It's a story filled with its own cracks, civil war, struggles for civil rights, ongoing debates about the very meaning of freedom. The nation, like its bell, is imperfect. It has been tested and it has shown its fractures. Yet, just like the bell, its power doesn't come from being flawless. Its power comes from its endurance. It comes from the ideals it strives for, even when it falls short. The crack in the Liberty Bell doesn't signify failure. It signifies a journey. It represents the stresses and strains that any great ideal must endure. It reminds us that strength is not about never breaking, but about how we hold together despite our fractures. This concept extends far beyond national symbols. Think about our own lives. We so often chase perfection. The perfect job, the perfect relationship, the perfect life. We see our own flaws, our own cracks, as failures. We see them as things to be hidden, to be ashamed of. But what if we viewed them like the crack in the Liberty Bell? What if our imperfections are what give us our character, our depth, our story? Our scars, both physical and emotional, are proof that we have lived, that we have been tested, and that we have endured. They are a part of our unique identity. A life without challenges, without a few cracks, would be a life unlived. The Japanese have an art form called kintsugi, where they repair broken pottery by mending the areas of breakage with lacquer dusted or mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. The philosophy behind it is that the object is more beautiful for having been broken. The repair is not hidden. It is illuminated, celebrated as part of the object's history. The Liberty Bell is America's kintsugi. Its crack is its gold seam, a visible reminder of its history and its resilience. It teaches us a powerful lesson. Sometimes things don't have to be perfect to be powerful. In fact, sometimes it is the very imperfection that grants them their greatness. The bell was meant to have a voice, and in a way its silence speaks louder than any peal ever could. It speaks of a messy, beautiful, and enduring struggle for liberty. It is a symbol not of a destination reached, but of a journey that continues, cracks and all. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of one of history's most powerful symbols. What do you think the crack represents? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into history and meaning, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content just like this. We'll see you in the next one. Hello everyone and welcome back. We've journeyed through the tumultuous life of an American icon, from its casting in a London foundry to its revered place in Philadelphia. Now we arrive at the final chapter of its story, not an ending but an eternal echo. The Liberty Bell no longer rings. Its voice, which once called citizens to hear the first reading of the Declaration of Independence, has been silent for over a century and a half. The great crack that runs through its bronze body is a permanent scar, a testament to the stresses and strains it endured. Yet, if you stand before it today, in the quiet of its pavilion, you can almost hear it. Not the clang of metal on metal, but a deeper, more resonant sound that reverberates through the very soul of the nation. This bell is more than just an artifact. It's a profound metaphor. It's a symbol of freedom, of course. The inscription from Leviticus proclaimed liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof, is etched not just on its surface but into the American consciousness. It was a promise, a radical idea in a world ruled by monarchs. And it became a rallying cry for a fledgling nation dreaming of self-determination. From the abolitionists who adopted it as their emblem in the fight against slavery to the suffragists who invoked its spirit in their struggle for the right to vote, the bell's message of liberty has been a constant source of inspiration. But its power doesn't just come from its perfection. It comes from its imperfection. That famous crack is what makes it so relatable, so human. It reminds us that the pursuit of liberty is not a smooth, unbroken journey. It's a story of fractures, of stress, of near shatterings. The nation itself has been cracked, tested, and strained. The path to fulfilling the promise inscribed on the bell has been fraught with conflict, contradiction, and compromise. The bell's imperfection tells us that resilience isn't about avoiding damage. It's about enduring it. It's about holding together, even when broken, and continuing to stand for something greater. Think about it. The bell was ordered to celebrate the 50th anniversary of William Penn's Charter of Privileges, a document that guaranteed religious freedom and self-governance in Pennsylvania. From its very conception, it was meant to be a symbol of rights and forward-thinking ideals. But its journey was anything but smooth. It cracked upon its very first test ring in Philadelphia. Imagine the disappointment. This grand symbol, shipped all the way from London, failed immediately. But the citizens didn't send it back. They didn't give up. Two local craftsmen, John Pass and John Stow, took on the challenge of repairing it. They melted it down and recast it, not once, but twice. Their efforts weren't perfect. The sound was reportedly not as pleasant, but they made it work. They persisted. This early story of the bell is a perfect miniature of the American spirit, a blend of ambition, initial failure, and gritty determination to fix things and move forward. Through the years, the bell bore witness to history. It rang for the First Continental Congress, for the battles of Lexington and Concord, and for that pivotal moment in July 1776, but its silence is just as powerful as its ring. After its final crack appeared in the 1840s, its role shifted. It transformed from an active participant into a silent observer, a steadfast monument. It became a pilgrimage site. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it traveled across the country by train, a Liberty tour that brought its symbolism directly to millions of Americans who couldn't make the journey to Philadelphia. Imagine seeing this icon, this piece of the nation's founding, roll into your town. It was a tangible connection to the past, and a reminder of the shared values that held a vast, diverse country together. In every generation, new groups have looked to the bell and seen their own struggles and aspirations reflected in its bronze surface. During the Cold War, its image was a powerful counterpoint to totalitarianism, a symbol of the freedoms the West championed. For civil rights activists, its silence was a poignant reminder that the promise of liberty had not yet been extended to all inhabitants of the land. They called for the nation to finally make the bell ring true for everyone. For every immigrant who arrives on these shores seeking a better life, for every citizen who stands up to protest injustice, for every young person who casts their first vote, the bell's message continues to resonate. It's a quiet symbol, standing now behind protective glass. You can't touch it. You can't hear it ring. But its power is undiminished. It's a testament to the idea that some principles are timeless. The bell doesn't need to make a sound because its message is carried in the actions of people. It's heard in the courts when justice is defended, in the classrooms where history is taught, and in the town squares where citizens gather to make their voices heard. The eternal echo of the Liberty Bell is the ongoing, often difficult, but always hopeful work of building a more perfect union. It reminds us that freedom is not a monument to be admired from a distance, but a responsibility to be carried by each new generation. The Liberty Bell is broken, and yet it is whole. It is silent, and yet it speaks volumes. It is a relic of the past that points resolutely toward the future. Its story is America's story, a tale of high ideals, of painful fractures, of enduring resilience, and of a promise that continues to echo through time, waiting for all of us to answer its call. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the history of the Liberty Bell. I hope it's given you a new appreciation for this incredible symbol. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you won't miss our next exploration into history. We'll see you in the next video.